What if I told you the history of Western thought holds a story so paradoxical it almost sounds like a myth? A man born into the lowest possible station in Roman society, a slave who rose to become one of the greatest masters of the mind. A man whose influence would echo through millennia, shaping emperors and prisoners of war alike. His story is the ultimate proof that true freedom isn't found in our circumstances, but in the unbreakable fortress of our own will. This is the story of Epictetus, the slave who, possessing nothing, not even his own body, taught the world the meaning of true mastery. Around 50 AD, in what is now modern-day Turkey, a boy was born. He wasn't given a name, but a label. When he was brought to Rome as property, he was called Epiktetos, which in Greek simply means acquired or purchased. He was an item, a thing, belonging to a man named Epaphroditus. Now, Epaphroditus was a symbol of Rome's contradictions. A former slave himself, he'd climbed the social ladder to become the right-hand man of the infamous Emperor Nero. But his past didn't inspire compassion. It bred a refined cruelty. In this world of absolute powerlessness, where his very life depended on the whims of a volatile master, young Epictetus found an unlikely lifeline: philosophy. Epaphroditus, for some reason, allowed him to attend the lectures of Musonius Rufus, a celebrated Stoic teacher. For the Roman aristocrats, Stoicism was an intellectual hobby. For Epictetus, it was a survival kit. The core idea of Stoicism was radical. Happiness and peace of mind don't depend on external things like wealth, health, or even freedom. Those are beyond our control. Happiness depends only on what is within our control, our judgments, our choices, our responses. For a slave who controlled nothing about his life, his body, or his future, this wasn't just a theory. It was a weapon for the soul. And he would soon need it in the most brutal way imaginable. The most famous story from Epictetus' life is a moment of horror he transformed into a masterclass in inner power. One day, his master, Epaphroditus, either in a fit of rage or just casual cruelty, began to torture him. He grabbed Epictetus's leg and started to twist it. As the agony intensified, Epictetus didn't scream or beg. He remained calm. He looked at his tormentor and said with a chilling serenity, "You will break it." Infuriated by this composure, Epaphroditus twisted harder, then a sickening crack. The bones snapped. Epictetus's leg was broken. Without a shred of despair or anger, he simply looked at the man who had crippled him and said, "Didn't I tell you that you would break it?" He limped for the rest of his life. But in that moment, who was the real master and who was the slave? Epaphroditus had power over Epictetus's body, but he had zero power over his mind, his will. He could break the bone, but he could not force Epictetus to despair, to hate, or to feel defeated. This is the Stoic dichotomy of control in action. Epictetus had trained his mind to see the pain as an external event. The real evil for a Stoic would have been to betray his own principles by giving in to hatred or self-pity. That day, the crippled slave proved he was the freest man in Rome. Eventually, after Nero's fall and Epaphroditus's own execution, Epictetus was granted his freedom. He was no longer legally the acquired one. He immediately began to do what he was born to do, teach philosophy. But powerful people have always been nervous around philosophers who teach virtue over blind loyalty. Around 93 AD, the paranoid Emperor Domitian banished all philosophers from Rome. For anyone else, this would be a disaster. For Epictetus, it was just a change of scenery. He moved to Nicopolis, a city in Greece, and founded his own school. And in one of history's greatest ironies, the school became one of the most famous in the entire Roman Empire. The sons of the elite, rich, powerful, free young men crossed the sea to sit at the feet of the former slave Rome had cast out. Like Socrates, Epictetus never wrote a word. For him, philosophy wasn't something you read, it was something you lived, a daily training of the soul. We would know nothing of his teachings if not for a devoted student, Arrian. He transcribed Epictetus' lectures into works we now know as the Discourses, and a powerful summary called the Enchiridion, or the Manual. It's a pocket guide on how to live a life of tranquility, no matter what chaos is happening around you, a user's manual for the soul, written by a student recording the words of a master who had been a slave. And Epictetus lived his philosophy. He didn't preach detachment from a palace. In Nicopolis, he lived in a simple hut with little more than a straw mat and an oil lamp. One night, a thief snuck into his open home and stole his only valuable possession, the iron lamp. Epictetus's reaction? No anger, no sense of loss. He just observed the event. He later said the thief got the worse end of the deal. Why? To get a cheap iron lamp, the thief had to trade away something priceless, his own integrity. The thief chose to become a thief. Epictetus, on the other hand, only lost a lamp. For a Stoic, that's an indifferent. It's preferable to have it, but losing it isn't a true evil. The next day, Epictetus simply replaced it with a cheaper clay lamp, remarking with a smile, "If the thief returns, he will be disappointed." It wasn't about embracing poverty, it was about not being owned by your possessions. Today, we often misunderstand the word stoic. We picture someone cold, emotionless. Epictetus's later life shatters this caricature. Stoicism isn't about eliminating emotions, it's about transforming destructive ones like rage and fear. It's absolutely about practicing positive ones, compassion, justice, and duty. After living alone for most of his life, an elderly Epictetus learned a friend had died, leaving behind a young son who was about to be abandoned. A lesser man might have called this an external event and walked away. But Epictetus, the true Stoic, saw it as a call to action. He couldn't control his friend's death, but he could control his response to the child's suffering. The only virtuous response was to help. The old philosopher adopted the boy, and realizing he couldn't do it alone, brought a woman into his home to help care for him. The man with no doors opened his home and his heart. Epictetus died a revered teacher. The man born as property died as one of the freest men who ever lived. His legacy, captured by Arrian, became a guide for some of history's greatest figures. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius quoted him constantly in his Meditations. Nearly 2,000 years later, a U.S. pilot named James Stockdale, held as a prisoner of war in Vietnam for over 7 years, said it was Epictetus' manual that gave him the mental fortitude to endure torture and maintain his honor. Epictetus's life proves his central teaching. We are not disturbed by things, but by the judgments we make about them. He showed that the heaviest chains are not made of iron, but are the ones we forge in our own minds: fear, anxiety, and anger. Epictetus, the crippled slave and master of the mind, taught us that no matter what life takes from you, it can never take your power to choose how you respond. Thank you so much for watching. If this story inspired you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the lives of history's most fascinating minds. See you next time.